Welcome to another story written by Oracle 1. The Phantom Children of the Derelict Subway Station. Chapter 1. The entrance to the station was almost invisible beneath the city. Marcus had walked past the rusted iron gate twice before realizing it was the place he had been searching for. The staircase beyond it descended into darkness. A faint smell of damp concrete and stagnant water drifted upward from the depths below, carrying with it the quiet, hollow echo of a place that had not heard footsteps in years. He glanced once over his shoulder. The street above was empty. A row of abandoned storefronts stared back at him with dusty windows and peeling paint. The neighborhood had been slowly dying for decades, and the subway station beneath it had been the first thing to go. Closed 20 years ago. Sealed off after the accident. Marcus adjusted the strap of his bag and stepped through the broken gate. The metal creaked softly behind him. His flashlight flickered to life, casting a narrow beam down the staircase. Dust hung in the air like gray mist. Each step echoed as he descended deeper underground. The temperature dropped noticeably with every step. By the time Marcus reached the bottom of the staircase, the air had become cold enough that he could see faint traces of his breath drifting through the beam of light. The station opened before him in a long corridor of cracked tile and rusted pipes. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling somewhere deeper inside. Drip, drip, drip. The sound echoed through the empty tunnels. Marcus pulled a small camera from his pocket and began recording. "This is Marcus Hale," he said quietly. "Urban Exploration Log Number 32. His voice bounced off the concrete walls and returned to him distorted. The old Red Line station beneath West Archer Street. Closed in 1998 after a train derailment killed 12 people. Most of the victims were children on a school field trip." He paused. The flashlight beam moved slowly across the corridor. Old advertisements clung to the tiled walls, their colors faded and peeling. A cartoon mascot promoting a long-vanished brand of cereal stared at him with a cracked smile. Marcus stepped forward. His boots scraped softly across the floor. Broken glass crunched underfoot. He moved carefully down the corridor until the tunnel widened into the main station platform. The sight of it made him stop. The station was enormous. 2 long platforms stretched into darkness on either side of a set of silent tracks. The ceiling arched high above, supported by thick concrete pillars that had begun to crumble with age. Benches sat overturned along the platform edges. A rusted subway car still rested halfway inside the tunnel, frozen in place like a relic from another time. Marcus lifted his camera. "This is it," he murmured. The derailment site. The car had slammed sideways into the tunnel wall decades earlier. Its metal shell was torn open along one side, exposing rows of empty seats inside. Marcus slowly walked toward it. The station was unnervingly quiet. No sound except the occasional drip of water. And the distant hum of the city far above. He crouched near the edge of the platform and shined his flashlight along the tracks. The rails were coated in rust. Dark puddles of stagnant water collected between the wooden sleepers. Everything felt frozen in time. As if the accident had happened yesterday. Marcus climbed down from the platform and stepped carefully onto the tracks. The flashlight beam swept across the wrecked subway car. Something about it unsettled him. He couldn't explain why. Perhaps it was the silence. Or the feeling that the station was somehow watching him. He reached the torn opening in the side of the car and peered inside. Dust covered everything. Seats were overturned. Old newspapers lay scattered across the floor. Marcus stepped inside cautiously. The metal floor creaked beneath his weight. He raised the camera again. "This is the car that derailed," he said softly. "The reports say the train was entering the station when the brakes failed. It jumped the tracks and slammed into the tunnel wall." His flashlight moved slowly along the rows of seats. Some of them still had small backpacks resting beneath them. Marcus frowned. That hadn't been mentioned in the reports. He crouched and lifted one of the backpacks. The fabric was stiff with age. A cartoon dinosaur was stitched onto the front pocket. He opened it carefully. Inside were school notebooks, crayons, a folded permission slip dated 20 years ago. Marcus felt a strange chill crawl down his spine. Why were these still here? Surely the station had been cleared after the accident. He placed the backpack back beneath the seat. Something creaked faintly behind him. Marcus turned quickly. The flashlight beam cut across the empty car. Nothing moved. He waited. The silence returned. He shook his head slowly. Probably just the structure settling, he muttered. But as he turned back toward the front of the car, he heard it again. A faint sound. Soft. Barely audible. Footsteps. Small footsteps. Marcus froze. The sound came from somewhere deeper inside the train. Step. 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 He raised the flashlight. Hello? The beam slid slowly down the aisle. Empty seats. Dust. Shadows. Then the footsteps stopped. Marcus held his breath. The silence stretched for several seconds. Then something rolled across the floor behind him. He spun around. One of the crayons from the backpack had fallen out. It rolled slowly across the metal floor before stopping near his boot. Marcus stared at it. He was certain he had zipped the bag shut. His heartbeat quickened. Is someone here? He called. His voice echoed through the car. No answer came, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Marcus stepped out of the subway car quickly and climbed back onto the platform. The station felt different now. The air had grown heavier, colder. His flashlight flickered slightly as he walked along the platform. He told himself the footsteps had been his imagination. Old buildings made strange noises. Everyone knew that, but then he saw something that made him stop. Tiny wet footprints. They stretched across the platform tiles. Small enough to belong to a child. Marcus slowly followed them with the flashlight beam. They led away from the subway car, toward the far end of the station, where the darkness was thickest. Marcus hesitated. The rational part of his mind urged him to leave, but curiosity pulled him forward. He followed the footprints. Each step echoed loudly through the empty station. The footprints continued along the platform, then turned down a narrow maintenance corridor Marcus hadn't noticed before. The entrance was partially blocked by a rusted chain. A warning sign hung from it. Danger. Authorized personnel only. Marcus ducked beneath the chain and stepped into the corridor. The air inside was even colder. The walls were bare concrete. Pipes ran along the ceiling overhead. The footprints continued down the hallway. Marcus followed them slowly. The corridor twisted several times before opening into a small underground room. Marcus stepped inside, and immediately stopped. The room looked like an old waiting area. But instead of benches, the floor was covered with small chairs. Children's chairs. A dozen of them arranged in a circle. Marcus felt a shiver run down his spine. In the center of the circle sat a small red ball. It rolled slowly across the floor, back and forth, as if someone invisible were nudging it. Marcus whispered softly, "Hello?" The ball stopped moving. Silence filled the room. Then something giggled. A child's giggle. It came from somewhere in the darkness behind him. Marcus turned. The corridor was empty. But when he looked back toward the chairs, they were no longer empty. Children were sitting in them. At least 10 of them. Pale figures with hollow eyes. Their clothes soaked as if they had just crawled from the flooded tracks. And every one of them was staring directly at him. One of the children slowly raised a finger to its lips and whispered, "Shush." Then the lights in Marcus's flashlight went out. Chapter 2. Darkness swallowed the room instantly. Marcus's flashlight had not flickered or dimmed. It had simply died. 1 second the beam had been shining across the circle of small chairs. The next second everything was black. Marcus stood frozen. The darkness felt thick underground, almost physical, pressing against his eyes. Then he heard it again. A soft giggle. Another one answered it from somewhere across the room. Then another. Children laughing quietly in the dark. Marcus fumbled with the flashlight in his hands, slapping the side of it with nervous force. Come on, come on. The laughter continued. Soft whispers drifted through the room. Tiny voices speaking to each other in low murmurs. Marcus could not understand the words, but the tone made his stomach tighten. They sounded excited, eager. The flashlight flickered suddenly. A brief flash of light exploded across the room. In that single instant Marcus saw the chairs again. But they were empty. The children were gone. The light died once more. Marcus felt his pulse racing in his ears. No, he whispered. The laughter had stopped. Now the room was completely silent. Too silent. Marcus reached slowly into his bag and pulled out a small emergency lantern. His fingers trembled as he switched it on. A dull yellow glow filled the room. The circle of children's chairs sat exactly where they had been before. Empty. The red ball rested quietly in the center of the circle. Marcus turned slowly in place. The narrow corridor behind him was still open. Nothing blocked the way out. Nothing stood there. But the cold in the room had deepened. The air felt wrong somehow. Marcus stepped carefully backward toward the corridor. The lantern cast long shadows across the concrete floor as he moved. Just before he reached the hallway, something tapped softly behind him. Tap, tap, tap. Marcus turned slowly. The red ball rolled across the floor again. It moved slowly through the center of the chairs. Then stopped directly in front of him. Marcus stared at it. A faint sound drifted through the air. Breathing. Light. Uneven. Children breathing. He could hear them all around him. But he could not see them. Marcus whispered into the darkness. I'm leaving. A voice answered him immediately. Don't. Marcus froze. The voice was small. A child's voice. It came from directly behind him. Marcus turned slowly. Nothing stood there. The corridor remained empty. But the breathing had grown louder. Many breaths now. All around him. The lantern flickered. For just a moment the light dimmed. And in that dim instant Marcus saw them again. The children. They stood all around the room now. Not sitting. Standing. Their bodies pale and soaked. Their clothes hung heavily from their thin frames as if they had been dragged through water. Their eyes were black. Not glowing. Just empty. The lantern brightened again. And the children were gone. Marcus staggered backward into the corridor. I'm not staying here, he muttered. The corridor seemed longer than before. The lantern cast weak light along the walls as he hurried through the narrow passage. Behind him something moved. Soft footsteps. Many of them. Following him. Marcus forced himself not to turn around. The footsteps remained several paces behind him. Never getting closer. Never falling behind. When he reached the main platform again, the station seemed darker than before. The vast space felt even more abandoned. Marcus climbed up onto the platform and turned back toward the corridor. The footsteps stopped immediately. The hallway was empty. Marcus exhaled slowly. Just echoes, he whispered to himself. But his voice sounded uncertain. He started walking along the platform toward the staircase that would lead him back to the street. The lantern's glow stretched across the cracked tiles as he moved. Halfway across the platform he heard something new. A faint metallic grinding sound. Marcus turned. The wrecked subway car sat exactly where it had been before. But the door at the end of the car was slowly sliding open. Metal scraping against metal. Marcus stared. The train had been dead for 20 years. Yet the door continued to slide open inch by inch. Finally it stopped. The darkness inside the car seemed deeper than the rest of the station. Marcus lifted the lantern slightly. Hello? A small voice answered. We're still here." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. The voice had come from inside the train. Another voice followed. Then another. Soft whispers. Dozens of them. Marcus took a step toward the train before he realized what he was doing. The whispers grew louder. "Come back. Play with us. We're lonely." Marcus shook his head. No. But his feet kept moving. Slowly he climbed down onto the tracks again. The whispers became clearer. Children speaking softly in overlapping voices. "We waited. You came. You saw us." Marcus stopped beside the open train door. The lantern. Light barely reached inside. The rows of seats were filled now. Children sat in every one of them. Silent. Watching him. Their wet clothes clung to their thin bodies. Water dripped slowly from their sleeves onto the floor. Marcus felt frozen in place. One of the children near the front of the car stood slowly. A little girl with long dark hair hanging across her face. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You found our room." Marcus swallowed. "Yes." The girl tilted her head. "You weren't supposed to." Marcus's grip tightened on the lantern. "What do you want?" The girl took a step closer. Water dripped from her shoes onto the metal floor. "We want to go home." The other children nodded silently behind her. Marcus shook his head slowly. "I can't help you." The girl raised one pale hand and pointed toward the far end of the station. "The door is there." Marcus followed her gesture. At the far end of the platform stood a heavy maintenance door he had not noticed before. Its surface was rusted and sealed with a thick chain. Marcus frowned. That door's been closed for years. The girl's black eyes never left his. "It's open now." Marcus looked back toward the door. The chain was gone. The door stood slightly ajar. Darkness waited beyond it. Marcus turned back toward the train. The children were still watching him. The girl spoke again. "If you open it, we can leave." Marcus hesitated. Something about the situation felt wrong. Very wrong. But the children's faces were filled with quiet desperation. He stepped away from the train slowly. "Stay here," he said. The girl nodded. Marcus climbed back onto the platform and walked toward the maintenance door. The station had grown quieter. Too quiet. Even the dripping water had stopped. When Marcus reached the door, he noticed deep scratch marks across the metal surface. Hundreds of them. Long desperate lines carved into the rust. As if something had tried to claw its way out from the other side. Marcus hesitated. Behind him the children spoke softly from inside the train. "Open it. We can go home. Please." Marcus reached out slowly and pushed the door open. The hinges groaned loudly. The darkness beyond the doorway seemed endless. Marcus lifted the lantern. A narrow stairwell descended deeper underground. Far deeper than the station itself. Cold air drifted up from below, carrying a faint sound with it. Children crying. Marcus turned slowly back toward the train. The girl stood in the doorway now. Her black eyes gleamed in the lantern light. "You opened it," she said softly. Marcus nodded. "Yes." The girl smiled, but there was no relief in her expression. Only something darker. Something hungry. Behind her the other children began climbing out of the train. One by one. Dozens of pale figures stepping silently onto the platform. Their movements were slow. Unnatural. Marcus felt dread settle deep in his chest. "Wait," he said. "You said you wanted to go home." The girl's smile widened. "We do." She pointed toward the stairwell behind him. "Through you." Chapter 3. Marcus stepped backward slowly. The stairwell behind him exhaled a cold breath that smelled like damp earth and rusted metal. The children were no longer inside the train. They were spreading across the platform. Dozens of them. Bare feet slapping softly against the cracked tiles as they moved closer. Their soaked clothes dragged across the ground. Water dripped from them steadily, forming thin trails across the floor that led back toward the subway tracks. Marcus raised the lantern. The weak yellow light stretched across their pale faces. They all looked the same now. expressionless, silent, watching him. Only the girl who had spoken before stepped forward. Her long dark hair clung to her cheeks as if she had just climbed from water. Her black eyes reflected the lantern light faintly. "You opened the door," she said softly. Marcus forced himself to remain calm. "I did what you asked." The girl tilted her head slowly. "Yes." Marcus gestured toward the stairwell. "So go." The girl did not move. None of them did. Marcus felt the cold tightening around his chest. "You said you wanted to leave." "We do," she replied. The children began walking again. One step at a time. Closing the distance. Marcus backed closer to the stairwell entrance. "You said through me," he said quietly. The girl nodded. "We need help." Marcus looked past them toward the dark subway tunnel where the derailed train still rested. The platform felt smaller now, as if the station itself were closing in. "What kind of help?" he asked. The girl's voice was barely a whisper. "The kind the living can give." Marcus's stomach tightened. "And what would that be?" The girl stopped a few feet away from him. Her head lifted slowly. "Breath." The lantern flickered faintly. Marcus stared at her. "What?" The girl took another step forward. "We can't breathe anymore." The other children began whispering quietly behind her. A soft overlapping chorus of thin voices. "Too dark. Too cold. We're trapped." Marcus felt his pulse racing. "You're ghosts," he said. "You don't need to breathe." The girl's expression did not change. "We were still breathing when the train stopped." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" The girl raised her arms slowly and pointed toward the subway tunnel. "The train didn't kill us." Marcus felt a chill crawl up his spine. "What?" The girl's voice remained soft. "It trapped us." Marcus glanced toward the wrecked subway car again. His mind began assembling the pieces. "The derailment." The girl nodded. "The doors wouldn't open." The other children spoke again behind her. "Too dark. No air." "We cried." Marcus swallowed slowly. "You suffocated." The girl nodded once. Marcus felt a wave of nausea rise in his stomach. "So you want, what?" Her black eyes held his. "We want breath." Marcus shook his head. "That's not possible." The girl stepped closer. "Yes, it is." The children began moving again, closing the circle around him. Marcus stepped backward into the stairwell entrance. Cold air drifted upward from the darkness below. "Stay back," he warned. But the children did not stop. Their whispers grew louder. "You opened the door. You let us out. You brought the air." Marcus's back touched the metal railing of the stairwell. There was nowhere else to go. The girl lifted one pale hand toward him. "Just one breath." Marcus felt panic clawing at his chest. "You're not real," he said. The girl's head tilted again. "Then why are you scared?" Marcus had no answer. The lantern flickered harder now. The children were only a few feet away. Their soaked clothes dragged across the floor like wet paper. Their mouths slowly began to open. Marcus saw something inside their throats. Not tongues. Not teeth. Just darkness. Endless darkness. The girl whispered softly. "Breathe in." Marcus shook his head violently. "No. Breathe in." Her voice echoed strangely now, as if dozens of voices were speaking through her. Marcus felt his lungs tighten. He realized he had been holding his breath. His chest burned. The girl leaned closer. "Just one breath." Marcus gasped. Air rushed into his lungs. And every child inhaled with him. The sound was horrifying. Dozens of sharp breaths pulled from the air at once. The lantern exploded into darkness. Marcus staggered backward down the stairwell. His lungs felt empty again. He tried to inhale. Nothing came. No air. Just a hollow vacuum inside his chest. The children stood at the top of the stairs, watching. Their bodies began changing slowly. Their chests rose and fell now. Breathing. The girl smiled faintly. It worked. Marcus tried again to breathe. His lungs refused. Cold panic flooded his body. He collapsed against the stairwell wall. His vision blurred. "You took my air," he rasped. The girl nodded gently. "You had so much." Marcus's body felt weak, heavy. The darkness inside the stairwell seemed to reach upward toward him. The girl spoke one last time. "We waited 20 years. The other children whispered behind her. "Thank you." Marcus slid slowly to the floor. His chest rose once more, then stopped. The children stood quietly in the station, listening. For the first time in 20 years, their lungs filled with air. The girl turned toward the platform. The children followed her silently. They walked past the wrecked subway car, past the rusted tracks, toward the staircase leading back to the street. As they climbed the stairs, their bodies slowly changed. The water dripping from their clothes dried. Color returned faintly to their pale skin. Their footsteps sounded heavier now. Real, alive. The girl reached the broken iron gate first. She pushed it open. Night. Air drifted into the stairwell. Fresh, cold. She took a deep breath, then stepped out into the city. The other children followed her. One by one they disappeared into the dark streets, leaving the station behind them. Deep below the city, Marcus's body remained at the bottom of the stairwell. His eyes stared upward into the darkness, but his chest no longer moved. Hours later, the old station grew silent again. The platform remained empty. The wrecked train sat frozen in place. But if someone listened closely enough in the tunnels beneath the city, they might hear a new sound drifting through the darkness. Footsteps. Adult footsteps. Slow, uneven, moving along the tracks. And somewhere far below the station, a man's voice whispering faintly in the dark, trying desperately to take a breath that would never come. For more stories, like and subscribe.